We're back at it again with MCC 17 Team Guides, where we take a statistical look at every team's best and worst games. We have plenty of very powerful teams this time around, with nearly all teams having the potential to make it to Dodgeball, given the right game order that is. My name is Lops, and here's our game order guide for MCC 17, Red v Green. Red Rabbits. The first team that was announced is led by the hunter duo George and Sapnap. Joining them is a wildcard Tubbo, a newcomer v Gumiho, who has already been grinding the practice server. For Gumi, we decided to use Sylvie's stats so that we have some data to work with. This team is very strong and is one of the favourites to make it to Dodgeball. The first game to target for Red is Survival Games, where they score a fantastic 1,428 points. They have the second highest average in the event, 35 coins behind Green. This is in large part thanks to Sapnap, who has shown himself to be one of, if not the best, SG player in the event. His win in MCC 15 obviously contributes to this, but Sapnap has put up consistently fantastic scores across multiple events. George and Tubbo also do very well, although Tubbo's score is a bit inflamed from his win in MCC 14 with Tommy. Regardless, this team is very strong in SG, and if Sapnap steps into the leadership role, this team is definitely one to watch. Their next best game is Sky Battle, averaging 1,313 coins. That puts them only barely in second behind Cyan. Once again, Sapnap does amazing, with Sky Battle being his best game, 555 points on average. George and Tubbo don't do too shabby either, with them both doing above their personal averages. Gumi on the other hand has inherited her worst game of Sky Battle from Sylvie, doing significantly below her personal average. This team is just solid across the board, and once again the trio of Sapnap, George and Tubbo is incredibly strong. Play this one late if you can. The worst game for Red is, without a doubt, Build Mart. They average 875 coins. Build Mart is the second worst game for Tubbo, George and Sapnap, making them one of, if not the weakest Build Mart team in the event. This team could do well given some good chemistry and communication, but should be played early or skipped if possible. The last game Red should avoid is Grid Runners, where they score 865 coins. In general, Grid Runners scores should be taken with a grain of salt. It has only been played once, meaning the data could be completely inaccurate, and it's a team game, meaning the scores are split. It's very possible that any Grid Runners predictions will be wildly off. Still, both Sapnap and George didn't do very well in MCC 16, causing this game to be their lowest average. The good news is that Tubbo did very well last MCC, as he was teamed with Fundy, Antfrost and 5UP. Still, this average is low and should generally be avoided, even despite the lack of conclusive data. Now that we've gone over the best and worst games, let's get into the optimal game order. The best game order for Red is Sands of Time, To Get to the Other Side, Parkour Tag, Ace Race, Hole in the Wall, Battle Box, Sky Battle, Survival Games, with Grid Runners and Build Mart being skipped. This gives Red a score of 19,784.5 coins, and first place in the event ahead of Cyan and Line. This team is definitely one of the favourites to make it to Dodgeball, and one to keep your eye on. Orange Ocelots. Next up, we have the team led by the most hydrated man himself, Pizza Hut. Joining him are his classic teammates of False and Green, and one of the biggest grinders in the event in SB 7-7. Interestingly, this team shares a lot of members with the MCC 13 Purple Pandas, hopefully looking to replicate that performance with a Dodgeball finish. Orange's best game by a lot is Hole in the Wall, where they average 1,309 coins. This is insanely high, putting them first in the event and beating second place by over 100 coins. Pete plays a large part in this score, being the strongest Hole in the Wall player in the event with a whopping average of 600 coins. Green and False do a bit below their average, but this is also one of SB's best games. Leave this one in your back pocket if you can. The next good game for Orange is Ace Race. They average 1,372 coins, another score that lands them first place in the event. Pete once again does incredibly well, but much of this score can be attributed to SB. This is SB's best game in the event by a mile, and he has proven that all of his hours in the practice server pay off in the event. This dynamic duo, supported by solid scores from Green and False, make this a game Orange definitely doesn't want skipped. For every good game, there must unfortunately be a bad game. That game for Orange is Battle Box, where they average just 1,003 coins. Most of Orange does about average or just below it, with one exception. Battle Box is Green's worst game by a wide margin, and without an especially strong PvP player, this is enough to try and get this game played on the early side. The other game Orange should try to avoid is Sky Battle. They average 961 coins, and once again most members do about average. However, this time SB is the one to struggle, as Sky Battle is one of his worst games. Granted, SB has only played Sky Battle twice, once in MCC 9 when the game was being played for the first time, and once in MCC 14 when he managed to get just a single kill. It is very possible that SB proved the stats wrong in this game thanks to a small sample size, but this game should still be avoided if possible. It's time for the optimal game order. The best order for Orange is Battle Box, Parkour Tag, Survival Games, Build Mart, To Get to the Other Side, Sands of Time, Ace Race, and then Hole in the Wall, with Sky Battle and Grid Runners not being played. This order gives Orange a score of 18,708.5 coins, first in the event ahead of Red. This team complements each other's weaknesses nicely, and there's certainly a path to dodgeball for this team. Yellow Yaks. This team combines the dream SMP duo of Wilbur and Rambo and pairs them with one of MCC's most iconic duos, Scott and Shovel. This team has a lot of experience as it unites 3 players who have played in every canon MCC. The biggest wildcard in this team is Rambo, who placed 14th in his first MCC and 24th in his second. If his team wants to make it to Dodgeball, they're going to need to get some high multipliers on good games. The best game for Yellow is Grid Runners, where they have 1,166 coins. Again, any Grid Runner scores should be taken with a grain of salt, but this team performed very well on MCC 16. Wilbur and Rambo led Red to 3rd place in MCC 16, and Scott and Shelby also did very well in their respective teams. We don't have enough data to say anything conclusive, but this team is one of the favourites to win this game of communication. The next game Yellow should try to target is to get to the other side. They average 1,123 coins, putting them just 17 coins behind the first place team. Scott and Shelby placed just below that average, and Wilbur placed a fair bit ahead of his. However, the reason this game is so good for Yellow is Rambo. Rambo was played to get to the other side twice, and both times he was the highest scoring player on his team. This is even when being teamed with very strong to get to the other side players like Tapel, Tommy and Bilzer. This is one of Rambo's best games, and it should be played later if possible. Now onto the bad games. The worst game for Yellow, Survival Games, where they average 782 coins, the lowest in the event. This time Scott and Shelby carry the game. Shelby especially has done well at SG in the past, and is one of the best games. Wilbur and Rambo on the other hand do not do as well. It is one of their worst games for both of them, but Rambo's score is especially low, the second worst score for any player in any game. This is due to 2 early deaths the 2 times Rambo's played it, both times without a kill. SG is always unpredictable, but if Yellow can play this game early, they should. The last game Yellow should watch out for is Ace Race, where they average 1,015 coins. After Wilbur's fantastic finish in MCC 16, he now scores above his personal average in Ace Race. Scott also does very well, although his scores are a bit inflated from his controversial first place in MCC 14. Removing that data point, Scott scores almost exactly his personal average. The reason this game isn't very good for Yellow are Rambo and Shovel, who have both done a bit below their personal averages. It isn't their worst game by any means, but it's enough to have this game be one to avoid instead of target. Time for the optimal game order. The best game order for Yellow is Ace Race, Battle Box, Hole in the Wall, Sky Battle, Sands of Time, Build Mat, To Get to the Other Side, and then Grid Runners, with Survival Games and Parkour Tag being skipped. This order gives them a score of 17,824 and a very narrow first place. This team can make it to Dodgeball, but is going to require a good game order and a few pop-offs. Llamas. This team is led by the first player to hit 50,000 total coins, Quig. Joining him are a trio from the Empire's SMP, Fwip, Solidarity Gaming, and newcomer Gemini Tay. For the purposes of these statistics, we'll be using Pearlescent Moon scores in place of Gemini Tays. This team is very consistent in every game, as they have the lowest standard deviation between their scores, but they still have good and bad games. The best game for this team is Sky Battle, where they average 1,224 coins. The reason for this score is Quig, who after a first place finish in MCC 16 has become the #1 Sky Battle player in the entire event. Sky Battle is his best game by a mile, and he averages over 600 coins alone, making up almost half of his score by himself. The rest of Line does below their personal averages, but Quig's insane individual scores are enough to recommend this game. The next best game for Lime is Build Mart, and this time is much more of a team effort. They average 1,203 coins. This time the standout player is Fwip, as he has the highest Build Mart average of any player in the event. German Solidarity also do very well, but Quig performs below his personal average. A lot of this can be attributed to coin splits and how it hurts stronger players, but Quig has still found ways to excel at Build Mart, especially with a good team of builders surrounding him. Despite this, Lime's consistency and teamwork should be more than enough to make this one of the best Build Mart teams in the event. Now it's time for some of the bad games. The worst game for Lime is Battle Box, where they score 1,203 coins. Solidarity actually does very well, with this being one of his best games, and Fwip does about average. The issue is that this is one of Quig's poorer games, and Gemini Tay has inherited Pearl's subpar Battle Box average. This game should be avoided, and skipped if possible. The next game Lime should avoid is surprisingly Sands of Time. They average 1,054 coins, or the 3rd worst in the event. Whip once again leads the way with his cracked ability at team games, but his average is significantly lower than it was for Build Mart. Every other member of Lime scores below average, with Quig being the most significant. However, it's worth mentioning that Pearl's score is a bit deflated from MCC 15. Without that blip, Gem should have inherited a pretty good average as a better representation of her ability. As is, this game should still be approached with caution if it's played. Next up is the optimal game order. The best order for Lime is To Get to the Other Side, Parkour Tag, Ace Race, Survival Games, Grid Runners, Hole in the Wall, Build Mart, and then Sky Battle, with Battle Box and Sands of Time being skipped. This gives them a score of 18,273 coins, first overall, and narrowly beating Red. This team could certainly make Dodgeball, and a lot of their chances are going to come down to Gemini Tay's first performance. For the last team of part 1, we have the newly named Green Geckos. This team is led by Puns, who finished first overall last event. Joining him are Team Rocket duo, MiChu and Jack Manifold, and the big brain himself, 5UP. This team is very strong and could be Puns' chance to silence the haters who still claim he is an S tier. The best game for this team is Survival Games. They average 1,462 coins. Not only first in Survival Games, but the highest average for any team in any game. This is largely thanks to Puns. Puns has played SG 3 times, and in those 3 events, he hasn't left the top 3 in Survival Game scores. What makes this even more impressive is that Puns has achieved this insane average without a single game win. Nikki also helps out the score a ton, with SG being her best game by a lot. Granted, her stats are probably a bit inflated from her win in MCC 14 with Tommy and Vic, but she put up another pretty good performance in MCC 16, so it's definitely not a bad game for her. Jack Manifold also does very well, and 5UP is the only member of Green who doesn't do great at survival games. SG is always a gamble, and it's hard to recommend, but if anyone's proven they can succeed consistently in SG, it's Puns. Try and get a large multiplier on this game if you can. On the opposite end of the spectrum, the next best game for Green is Build Mart. They average 1,146 coins. The biggest contributors to this score are 5UP and Nikki, who both have this among their best games. However, it's worth mentioning that 5UP has only played Build Mart once, so we'll have to wait and see if he can repeat his performance. Jack also does well, but Puns falls significantly below his average. However, Puns' score can mostly be attributed to the coin split, as he's actually pretty good at Build Mart. He finishes ahead of great Build Mart players like Green, Shovel, and Cubfan. Green is a very good Build Mart team, and certainly one to keep your eye on. Now onto the bad games. The worst game for Green is Hole in the Wall, where they score 740 coins. This score places them last in the event, and it isn't really that hard to see why. Every member of Green falls more than 40 coins below their personal average, with Nikki struggling the most. 5UP has only played Hole in the Wall once, but the team does poorly enough across the board to justify skipping this one. Do not play this game if you don't have to. The other bad game for Green is Ace Race, where they average 806 coins. This game is hard carried by Puns, who makes over half score by himself. Ace Race is one of his best games, and he averages 3rd in the event behind only Quig and Illumina. Still, the rest of the team struggles across the board. Ace Race is both Nikki and 5UP's worst game, and it is Jack's second worst, even in spite of a good finish in MCC 15. Still, with the possibility of a new map in the air and Puns' domination, hope may not be lost for this team. Avoid this one if you can, and approach with caution if you can't. Finally, we have the optimal game order. The best order for Green is To Get to the Other Side, Sky Battle, Parkour Tag, Battle Box, Sands of Time, Grid Runners, Build Mart, and then Survival Games, with Ace Race and Hole in the Wall being skipped. This gives Green an average of 18,722, placing them first ahead of Cyan and Red. This team has a shot at Dodgeball, but luck may have to be on their side.